Dopamine is the hormone that affects energy, mood, and motivation. You can predict how you will feel in the coming minutes, hours, and even days just based on how you have been managing your dopamine levels in the past. After learning the basic ways it functions and changing my habits accordingly, I began to have more energy and motivation than ever before. You can do the same. What is up, YouTube? My name is Aiden Helfont. I am a freshman Cornell University student who makes videos on life advice as well as learning and fitness. Today, we're going to be talking about dopamine. I will first talk about the science behind how dopamine works in the body. Then I will describe how it affects our mood, energy, and happiness. Finally, I will give some actionable tips on how you can utilize this information to have infinitely more energy and motivation throughout your day. Before we get started, I want to tell you all why dopamine management means so much to me. Much like other kids, I went through a rough time during the beginning of the pandemic. Stuck inside, I could not see my friends nearly as much as I used to and fell upon video games, food, and YouTube as my comforts. To make matters worse, I began my weight loss journey with inadequate advice and practically starved myself to lose 30 pounds. 6 months into the pandemic, I'm sitting on the couch, depressed, bored, and tired of life. Then, I pick up a book and start reading. I spend hours entranced in wonderful new worlds completely different from my own. I hadn't read since my childhood, but instantly fell back in love after starting into the Stormlight archives. Soon, my passion for reading turned into a hunger for learning. I started to pick up non-fiction books and learn things I never could even have dreamed of in high school. It wasn't long after that I learned how dopamine affects the body. Finally, for what felt like the first time in my life, something I learned was physically applicable. I tell you this because I want you to know that change is possible. Constantly feeling stressed, sad, and unmotivated isn't a fact of life. You can change your life for the better, and it all starts with managing your dopamine. Let's get into the video. How dopamine acts on the body. Put simply, dopamine is a molecule released into the body to make you look outside of yourself, pursue things outside of yourself, and crave things outside of yourself. Brings people into a state of alertness, readiness, and desire. Dopamine acts like any other neurotransmitter. It acts on one nerve cell by causing it to release vesicles or tiny bubbles filled with chemicals. These vesicles travel through a region called a synapse to another neuron and activate it at its dendrites. Most of the time, dopamine stays at two levels: tonic and phasic levels of dopamine. Tonic levels of dopamine are our baseline that we stay at during most of the day. Phasic levels of dopamine are the spikes or drops in dopamine that we have in anticipation of pleasurable acts and right after them. These phasic levels of dopamine are possible because of dopamine's unique ability to engage in volumetric release. Volumetric release is like normal neurotransmission, except it gets out 50, 100, or even thousands of cells. This means dopamine is capable of acting at a vast scale. These massive excretions in dopamine might sound awesome, but many of the problems in motivation, energy, and happiness arise because of it. How dopamine affects energy, mood, and motivation. Your tonic and phasic levels of dopamine quite literally determine how you will feel on any given day. If your dopamine levels are high, you will have the energy and drive to pursue things outside yourself. If it is low, you will feel depressed and unmotivated. If they're in the middle, you will feel primarily based on where your levels of dopamine were a few minutes ago. Managing your dopamine effectively is an art. It is possible to feel energized, motivated, and happy for the majority of the day. Surprising, I know, but it's true. The thing you must understand is that dopamine works on a positive-negative feedback loop. This means when you have a spike in dopamine, you will have a corresponding drop sometime afterward. The pleasurableness of this spike and the negative effects of this drop are all determined based on how far away the phasic levels were from your tonic baseline levels. One reason people never feel happy, energized, or motivated is that they do too many highly pleasurable acts too frequently. This literally raises your tonic levels of dopamine, meaning the pleasure derived from the same activities won't have nearly the same amount of an effect. However, instead of lowering the frequency, many people often make the apps more pleasurable to counteract the effect. The result is addiction. Okay, so we know how dopamine works in our body and how it determines how we feel daily. Now, what are some tricks we can utilize to use dopamine to our advantage? Tricks to keep healthy dopamine levels. My first trick is to utilize the power of random scheduling. As said before, one of the reasons people's dopamine levels are out of whack is because they do too many pleasurable acts regularly. Say whenever you go to the gym, you blast your favorite song, glug a gallon of pre-workout, and reward yourself with some greasy pizza afterward. Every single time. After a couple of occurrences, you won't derive nearly the same pleasure from these acts as you did the first time. To counteract this, you need to implement random scheduling into your pleasurable activities. One of my favorite ways to do this is by flipping a coin. I love watching YouTube. However, if I watched YouTube every day, I would quickly become numb to its pleasurable effect. I have made up for this by flipping a coin every single time that I go running. If it's heads, I get to watch YouTube during my run. If it's tails, I have to listen to a podcast, audiobook, or even nothing instead. Do this same thing for your pleasurable activities. Not knowing when you will get a reward makes it so much more fun and pleasant when you do. My second tip is to adopt the habit of friction loving. Ultimately, getting ourselves to do things with rewards is good, but the absolute best scenario is deriving pleasure from the act of doing something itself. This is where the power of friction loving comes in. So many people, including old me, struggle to go to the gym. They can't motivate themselves to do so without some extrinsic reward of some kind. To counteract this, we need to derive pleasure from the very friction of doing something itself. So how do you do this? In those moments of the most intense friction, tell yourself this is very painful, and because it's painful, it will evoke an increase in dopamine release later. But you also have to tell yourself that at that moment, you are doing it by choice, and you're doing it because you love it. It sounds like you're lying to yourself, and in a sense, you are. You will find that if you do it enough, however, you might just derive pleasure from the hard thing itself. I love running, going to the gym, and even writing these YouTube scripts. Normally hard things have turned into ways that I can de-stress and unwind. The same can happen to you. My third tip is to implement a daily gratification ritual. Journaling is one of the most powerful and self-healing things that you can do with your time. I have implemented a daily gratification habit into my mornings, and I can't tell you enough how much it has helped me appreciate life. The reason this works is that dopamine doesn't just release during a pleasurable activity. It's released in anticipation of something pleasurable as well. The reason for this goes back to our times as hunter-gatherers. When we were safe in our caves and away from harm, we needed something to motivate us to go out and look for food. Dopamine forced us to go outside and forage, even in times when we didn't have to. The mere thought of food was enough to get our Neolithic selves outside and scouring for the next delicious meal. You can do the same thing by implementing a gratification habit into your day. For example, I write 3 things that I'm grateful for every single morning. Doesn't have to be that long. Find 3 things in your day that you legitimately appreciate having. A nice shower, your best friend, or even a cup of coffee in the morning. Once you see the benefits start to accrue, you won't ever want to stop the routine again. If you have made it this far, it's clear that you care about the science behind what makes you stay motivated, energized, and happy throughout your day. Using these techniques, I full-heartedly believe you can make the same transformation I did and finally enjoy life. If you thought this video was helpful, be sure to check out my videos on how to stop procrastinating and stay motivated, as well as best tips for better health/diet in college. As always, I hope you have a fantastic day, and bye-bye.